Chapter 11 of The Moral Pirates. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by CGEM98. The Moral Pirates by William Livingston Alden. The Fight with the Tramps. "Boys," said Tom, as he was kindling the fire the next morning, "do you know what day it is?" "Saturday, of course," replied the others. "You're wrong. It's Sunday." "It can't be," exclaimed Harry. "But it is," persisted Tom. "Last night was the 6th night that we've slept outdoors, and we started on a Monday." Tom was right, but it was some time before his companions could convince themselves that it was actually Sunday. When they finally admitted that it was Sunday morning, they gave up the idea of proceeding up the canal and began to discuss what they had better do. The boat, which had been drawn out of the water the night before, was concealed by a clump of bushes from the canal boatmen. The boys decided to leave it where it was, and to carry the tent and most of their baggage to a grove a quarter of a mile distant, where they could pass a quiet Sunday. The locks were not yet open, and no canal boats were stirring, and the boys made their way to the grove at once, while their movements were unobserved. They were afraid that if they attracted the attention of the boatmen to the clump of bushes, someone would steal the White Wing while her crew were absent. They had already seen enough of the canalers to know that they were a wild and lawless set of men, and they were not anxious to put the temptation of stealing a nice boat in their way. The grove was a delightful place, and when they had pitched the tent under the shadow of the great oak trees, they were glad of the prospect of a good day's rest. Tom and Harry walked nearly a mile to church in the morning, leaving the Sharp boys to look after the camp, and they all slept most of the afternoon. About dusk, as the fire for cooking supper was blazing briskly, Joe returned from a foraging expedition quite out of breath, and with his milk pail half empty. He said that he had met 3 tramps on the road which passed through the grove not very far from the camp, and that they had snatched a pie from him that he had bought at a farmhouse, and had chased him for some distance. He had been badly frightened, as he frankly admitted, but the other boys thought it was a good joke on him. They told him that the tramps would track him by the milk that he had spilled and would probably attack the camp and scalp him. They soon forgot the adventure, however, with the exception of Tom, who, although he said nothing at the time, poured water on the fire as soon as the supper was cooked, an act which somewhat astonished the rest. Soon afterward he went into the tent for a few moments, and when he returned he was beginning to advise Joe not to laugh quite so loud, when the crackling of branches was heard in the grove, and 3 very unpleasant-looking men appeared. It was fast growing dark, but Joe immediately recognized them as the tramps who had stolen his pie. "We've come to supper," said one of them. "Let's see what you've got. Give us the bill of fare, sonny, and look sharp about it." Tom immediately answered that they had eaten their supper, and that there was nothing left of it but some coffee. "If you want the coffee, take it," said he. "There isn't anything else for you." "That ain't a polite way to treat 3 gentlemen as come a long ways to call on you," said the tramp. "We'll just have to help ourselves, and we'll begin by looking into your tent. Perhaps you've got a crust of bread there. What'll save a poor, starvin' workin' man from dyin' on the spot?" Tom hastily stepped before the tent. "You can't go into this tent," he said very quietly, "and you'd better leave this camp and go about your business." "Just hear 'em," said the tramp, addressing his companions. "As if this here identical camp wasn't our business. Now, boys," he continued, "you've got money with you, and you've got clothes, and one on you's got a watch, and you're going to give 'em to 3 honest, hard-working men, or else you're going to have your nice little throats cut." "Here, boys, quick!" cried Tom, rushing into the tent where he was followed by the other boys before the tramps could stop them. "Here, Harry," he continued, "take the boat hook. There's a hatchet for you, Jim, and a stick for Joe. Now we'll see if they can rob us." So saying, he stepped outside the tent with the gun in his hand, followed closely by his little army. The ruffians hesitated when they saw the cool way in which Tom confronted them, so they proposed a compromise, as they called it. "Look-a-here," said the one who had hitherto been the spokesman, "we ain't unreasonable, and we'll compromise as your business. You give us your money and the chap's watch, and we'll let you alone. That's what I call a very handsome offer." "We won't give you a thing," replied Tom, "and I'll shoot the first one of you that lays a hand on us." The tramps consulted for a moment, and then the leader, with a frightful oath, ordered Tom to drop that gun instantly. Tom never said a word, but he cocked both barrels and waited, with his eye fixed on the enemy. Presently the tramps separated a little, the leader remaining where he had been standing, and the others moving, one to the right and the other to the left of the boys. They evidently intended to rush on Tom from 3 directions at once, and so confuse him and prevent him from shooting. "I'll take the leader and the man on the right," whispered Tom to Harry. "You lay for the other fellow with your boat hook. I've given you fair warning," he continued, addressing the ruffians, "and I'll fire the minute you try to attack us." The boys were standing close together in front of the tent, Tom being a little in advance of the others. Suddenly the leader of the tramps called out, "Now then!" and all 3 made a rush toward Tom. He fired at the tramp in front of him, hitting him in the leg and bringing him to the ground. But before he could fire again, the other 2 were upon him. The boys gallantly stood by Tom. Harry attacked one of the tramps with the boat hook so fiercely that the fellow cried out that he was stabbed and ran away. Meanwhile, Tom was struggling with the 3rd tramp, who had thrown him down and was trying to wrench the gun from him, while Jim and Joe were hovering around them, afraid to strike at the tramp for fear of hitting Tom. But now Harry, having driven off his antagonist, flew to the help of Tom, and seizing the tramp by his hair and bracing one knee against his back, dragged him backward to the ground and held him there until Tom regained his feet, and holding the muzzle of the gun at the robber's head, called on him to surrender, which the fellow gladly did. "Get some rope, Jim, and tie him," cried Tom. "Hold on to his hair, Harry, and I'll blow his brains out if he offers to move." The tramp was not at all anxious to part with his brains, and he remained perfectly quiet while Jim and Joe tied his feet together and his hands behind his back. "Now, you stand over him with the boat hook, Harry," said Tom, "and I'll see to the other fellow." The other fellow was of course the man who had been shot. Tom lighted the lantern, for it was now quite dark, and found that the ruffian had been shot in the lower part of his right leg and had fainted from loss of blood. Taking a towel, Tom tore it into strips and bound up the wound, and by the time he had finished, the patient became conscious again and begged Tom not to take him to prison. Now this was precisely what the boys did not want to do, as it would probably delay them for several days and perhaps put an end to their cruise. Tom therefore said to the prisoner, whom Harry was guarding, that if he would promise to help the wounded man away and take him to see a doctor, he would be released. The tramp gladly accepted the offer, and Harry unfastened the rope from his legs and arms while Tom kept his gun in readiness to use it at the first sign of treachery. The tramps, however, had quite enough of fighting, and were only too anxious to get away. The wounded man was helped to his feet by his companion, and the 2 went slowly off, one half carrying the other, and both cursing the coward who had run away. As they hobbled off, Tom called out, "I'm sorry I had to hurt you, But I couldn't help it, and if any of you come back here tonight, you'll find us ready for you." It was a long time before the boys fell asleep that night, and Tom was overwhelmed with praise for his coolness and bravery. Though he felt certain that the tramps would not return, he proposed that a sentinel should keep guard outside the tent, offering to share that duty with Harry, since the other boys were not familiar with guns. So all night long Tom and Harry, relieving one another every 2 hours, marched up and down in front of the tent, keeping a sharp watch for robbers, and preparing for a desperate fight every time they heard the slightest noise. End of chapter 11.